think it's interesting. I think Jill shares the insight as well, where I think timing when we should get involved is could be, yeah. I think with regards to UX and UR, I think there's a timing aspect of when we should get involved in the project. I think there's probably, it depends on this big, when it comes to sort of a lot of the technical data stuff, I think there's probably a piece of work where that needs to sort of take shape and then bring in sort of UX, UR expertise when that sort of reached the level of maturity. I'm not saying it wasn't applicable for this. I think actually that it benefited where I didn't join this until sort of a couple of months down the line, and it started to take shape. I think timing is a big thing because the danger is with these projects that UX and UR can sort of sit on the sidelines and you can be squirreled away. And I think it's important that you're involved in the right moments, not just as a sort of nice to have bolt-on thing. I don't know what you guys think, but I do think there is a time and a place, and it's not necessarily at the start. I just think, yeah, it just depends on when you need that skill set, and just picking your moments, I think, more so than just being involved for the sake of being involved.
Yeah, filling the timeline, I guess, to that point. So the project they get kicked off. There was a UR person, Erica, was involved at the get-go. She's kind of helping to shape the work, involved with the pitch.
Yeah.
And then after about a month, Erica rolled off, and you and Jill joined as more kind of long term on the gig until recently when you rolled off.
Yeah.
To fill in that little gap. Andrew, yeah, you're nodding there. What's the thoughts are you having?
Yeah, I think I also agree with it's like you don't just want to do it as like a bolt on towards the end. And I must be honest, when I first started off on the project, I thought maybe the timing, maybe it was a bit soon, and maybe you guys should just polish it at the end. But the longer we rolled with it and the more you guys learned along the way, the more valuable the outcome was. So it's maybe harder to kind of justify in the beginning, but with stuff like this, it's very contextual, the information, trying to make sense of it in context. And if you just get parachuted in at the end to try and put gloss on what's already done, that you're really missing the point. So I actually felt like I was like really sort of like, as we went deeper into it, the value that was being added with things like taxonomy, terminology, using the right wording, because as technical people, we often tend to be like, oh wow, look, we've got this brilliant data point, and the business is like, they don't really understand what it took to get that data point. They just see a data point, like, oh well, we got lots of data points. Whereas what I felt was the user research element made sure that we were giving them what they expected, and the user design, user experience element gave what they could understand. So we met the expectation with something that was digestible. So I felt like the two things worked together super well. And if you're doing like an app development, that could, you would be going to your customers to try and establish what they want, or you as a product manager is like just taking a few bets or that kind of thing. Whereas with this type of project, that's very specific. It's not just like, oh, we want a shopping basket. It's like, no, we need a specific piece of information in a format that's digestible, that can prove a point, kind of thing. So there's a subtle difference there, I feel.
Yep. I think the testing sessions were invaluable, even just from a data perspective. It's probably unusual in those types of projects to actually get access to users and internal staff. And I think that it's very, very useful to get that feedback early, and it can stop you going down rabbit holes, and it's also good from an engagement perspective as well, where you bring the business along as well, especially if they've not been used to that type of, or that way of working as well. So yeah, it was very useful. Our first testing session was with a board member. It's the top, you go straight into the top, which is not common, which I thought was really interesting, just because they can give a good steer and good direction as well, which I thought was useful.
Yeah. So as a bit of context, the piece of work we were working on was to help a client deliver some awesome new regulatory kind of regulatory stuff that their board would need to test and whatnot, which we did successfully, which is awesome. Really, so you mentioned about like being brought in the end to kind of add a gloss, Andrew. That sounds awful. From I mean, so yeah, from my perspective, I was a bit stepped back. I think you guys, obviously, Carl, you were involved deeply, and I was kind of a bit stepped back doing some more of the architectural stuff. But what I saw was there were just some turning points in the, like when Jill pulled out the personas, the proto personas and things. There seemed to be some light bulbs go on there. There seemed to be a lot of interest. But then that whole, like, you ended up shaping the way the work was structured, like even down to the actual kind of source code level, because there was a lot of like questions in the team about how to structure this thing to make it make sense and to make it maintainable. And when you and Jill came along and you came in with, you know, your insights into the way that, I guess that it was to do with the way people in the interviews were talking about this data and how they needed to use it and the kind of issues that they had, that led you to some thoughts about structuring it. That was just like I think it was a total turning point. It seemed like a light bulb moment for the whole team from where I was sitting.
Yeah, I think it's just, yeah, I think maybe the first couple of weeks, Jill and I struggled a little bit just trying to find our place and just getting up to speed as well, especially considering, you know, you guys had a bit of a head start as well, so you have a bit more context. So it just takes time to build up that knowledge, that domain knowledge. Yeah, and I guess not to sidetrack that conversation, but do any of you guys think about the tooling that we didn't push hard enough on not using Power BI just because I've used it for the past? Or is that, it's a tricky one, because to me, the interesting thing with this project was we had deadlines, like hard and fast deadlines to hit. So we had to hit those, which we did, which is good. But the tooling is still just, it really annoys me using that Power BI. I know it's used within the business, but it's so outdated and it's difficult to, you know, impose. You've just got to work really hard to get it to sort of do what we needed it to do. I don't know. It's interesting just because I'm just looking back through some of the discovery stuff, and yeah, maybe I could have. Yeah, it's difficult, you know, from a UCD perspective, trying to influence, you know, tooling choice, because a lot of the times it becomes a technical thing of, you know, can do X, Y, and Z, so we have to use it. So yeah, I don't know if you had any strong opinions on Power BI or anything like that.
Well, we did look at the tooling choices early on. Now Andrew did a bunch of work on this early doors. One of the, as we were kind of going through that exercise, one thing that was just came more and more in my mind was like the options that are on the table as alternatives. I don't know that they would actually be better in practice. I mean, this kind of like reporting tooling, I've used Google Data Studio, Power BI now, something else, can't remember what it was called, but things that made them hard to use and difficult to use, kind of like commonalities between them. I know they did also, there's a particular kind of element, the reporting tooling you're using will tend to lend itself more outside of user research, but into like a big wide table full of data, or building some like relational model within the tooling to do kind of like filter dimensions and things like that. It's kind of like it's to me like quite a key choice. But yeah, what we were considering, we were looking at QuickSight, kind of Power BI. What else is on the list, Andrew?
I think
QuickSight looks to be similar.
Tableau as well. With the
Tableau,
Tableau.
I don't know about Tableau. Have you ever used Tableau at all, either of you?
I've seen it. It doesn't. I've interacted with it. It wasn't really blowing my mind. Like, I mean, I'm a little bit biased because when it comes to dashboards and presentation stuff, I've always found the only way to really get it to do what you want is to like hand crank it. So like get like a JavaScript chart library, or like even the Google chart APIs are really, you can customize them. And then if you really want to go crazy, you'll end up using like ggplot2 or something like that to like you can get the exact pixel perfect outcome that you're after. So I find like those sort of GUI tools are they just, you can only bend them so far, and then you run out of options really, like to cheat them or whatever. Like, you know, even in Excel, like if you're trying to graph, you can do quite a lot of pretty clever stuff, but you get to a point where there's just, that's as far as you go and no more. So you run out of options.
Yeah, well, I think they're terrible design, like from a designer's perspective, they're terrible tools to use. They're not intuitive. They haven't improved in years. They feel really dated. And it's such a missed opportunity, I think, because I think that's what's also been interesting with regards to this project. We, Jill and I have been representatives for UCD in this team on this project, and we're working with analysts, non-designers effectively, so when we were talking about design systems and things, it's a very different context compared to, the Fleur design system, VHL, it's consumer facing, it's for designers. Whereas the change here was, it was analysts and, report builders who don't necessarily have a design layout background that needed assistance and help in order to, guidance basically, where it's a slightly different twist on sort of design systems and stuff.
Yeah, and to clear up what we're talking about here, this isn't kind of like polish, getting just the right shade or something other. This is like you had specific visualization. Was it like a multi-set or something that I can't remember what it was called?
Upset.
That was it. There was like a specific kind of visualization that we just couldn't do, but you could work them through with the clients, people, and it was like, this is what they want, but we can't do it.
Yeah.
And then I guess you're talking more about as well, like being able to kind of work across like a complex set of like charts and visualizations and and text to support all that sort of thing, getting it to lay out the way you want it to, and getting it to filter the way you need it to, and getting it to flow nicely, so that from the user perspective, they can get to the information they need quickly, and there's less risk of confusion or ambiguity or whatever. I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think that's these things that Jill mentioned and you've mentioned.
Yeah, because I think as well, we had access to real data early on, and I think using dummy data would never have landed with I think that's the interesting thing with testing. And with real users, if you say, oh, this data is fake, you're only ever going to get a certain level of feedback. And I think using real data is so critical to honest, proper feedback. And when it comes to, I'm just looking at what we tested. We tested early on like types of data visualizations. We were really looking at the data, how best to visualize it with the appropriate charts, and then we sort of layered up the complexity then with the tooling as well. So it's not just pretty pictures. It's much more. It's deeper than that. So I think unfortunately, obviously, because we're rolling off this project, that opportunity to really influence that when it comes to sort of how they visualize data, I think there's a potential missed opportunity there. I think it'd be worth maybe in the future there might be an opportunity to revisit that, where you can really help steer that as well, because there's a big hole in the design system around data, and it'd be good to sort of tackle that. That'd be a really nice project to maybe look at as well. So something to think about.
Well, that's really interesting insight. I'd not thought about the importance of real data for actually getting that feedback, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
they're going to react, aren't they? If they can,
exactly.
If it's real,
because if you show a chart and go, the line's wrong, or it doesn't, you immediately they just go, oh, this isn't real. And I think that's the trick is, oh, here is a chart that is contains real data, real client data, and then you get better feedback. I think it's very important.
Andrew, is there anything you? Sorry.
That's always amazed me how, from even quite a long time ago when I used to sort of demonstrate a system and you go test as your fields, the people just zone out. They can't actually connect what you're trying to demonstrate, even though you're showing them what actually the system can do, because it's just got rubbish data in there. They're like, what is this? Why does this say this? It's like, no, well, it's just an example. If you don't have real world examples or the actual real data, you definitely miss an opportunity there to get them to engage.
Yeah, same. Well, I worked with a retailer before this on their online search capability, and nobody even really bothered trying to demonstrate anything on the integration test system, where there were a tiny minority of products and they all had wrong product data and stuff like that. It was all obviously it was all public data anyway, so there was no risk. But people responded to the real data, the real products. That's the wrong order. That should be there. This doesn't make sense. Why is that there? If it had been test data, it would have been like, oh, it's because it's test data. I've not thought about it, but I can see totally what you mean. one area that I'd like to wrap up with, just around how you found working with the engineering elements of the team, because there was a little bit of friction. It seems like we got over that, so I'd really like to kind of capture that. It could be useful to other teams. I think we had similar conversations before you joined about UI as well, trying to figure out how the engineering team, which works in a very particular way, can work effectively with the designers who work in a different way. Where like most of the engineering teams, I guess it's boards, Kanban style, small tickets in theory, the normal sorts of ceremonies. And yeah, I'm struggling to remember some of the details, but you want to talk a little bit through about some of the challenges that you found from your perspective landing in a team like that, and did we get through them, or were they still there at the end?
Yeah, this is it. I think we functioned quite well when we allowed each other the space, like the different disciplines, the space to work how they want to work. I think where the challenge is with, and this is, I've worked on multiple teams now, and it's the same issues that keep coming up. You know, developers, engineers have a very specific way of working. With around mobbing and pairing and all, and it doesn't map that well. It doesn't map, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I don't think it maps well when it comes to UX and UI. It's very different. The way we approach things is very different. It might just be a personal thing from my perspective, but I think it's just used. I think when it comes to Jira and things, it's just not a very useful tool when it from a design perspective, and it's kind of. We tried the different swim lanes and things, and I think we got a approach. I don't know if it's the best one. It's a trick. It's all. I think there's always going to be tension, and I think personally it's just respect each other's areas of expertise, and just let engineers work the way they want to work. But make sure there's space to collaborate as well. I think that's the key. It doesn't need to be all the time. It just needs to. Things like huddles, for example, I think are very useful, which is a new thing. I've never done huddles before. We used to do stand up and then went, see you later. Then we talked to designers, engineers would talk to themselves, and then very little crossover. Only at retros, but then the problem with the retros then it's all split.
Yeah.
Whereas I think huddles start to bridge that gap, I think, which is quite useful as well. So
we had our stand up sort of focused on working the tickets were in progress and stuff, and then immediately afterwards there was a meeting that was quite long, but it was only used as much as was needed, and the idea was, I think, to make the space in the calendars so that there could be this kind of huddle conversation. Anything we'd get through stand up, and then people who weren't interested in other topics could leave, although most of the time I think everyone stayed. But and then you're talking about the bit at the end of that.
It's just that exactly, it's just that opportunity to be involved. John may not, his view is everyone should be involved all the time. I tend to think you just need to create the opportunities for those sort of collaboration sessions to happen, but then be flexible enough to drop off if you don't need to, if you're not interested or you've got better things to do, and things like that. So I think that's the challenge. It's not. I thought our team functioned quite well. I don't know what you guys thought. I thought, there was good collaboration when it was required, especially the in-person. I think in-person sessions are very useful as well, just to sort of break that, the virtual wall and actually see people face to face, which is good as well. So
definitely, the on-site sessions.
Yeah, very useful.
Yeah, from my perspective, it was quite a bit of friction and trouble at the beginning, trying to figure out how to make it work.
Yep.
But I wonder if part of that was just because it took us a long time to really get the visualizations up and running for real. So I wonder if that pushed you out further than you would otherwise have been if we'd done that earlier. It's like as soon as it started doing that, then it all started. Every day you were involved, every day the feedback was needed.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe is one of the reasons that it took a while to settle down. But it certainly felt. I was stepping away from the scene a little bit at that point, but it certainly felt like you were much more involved, and it was all gelling much better towards the end.
Yeah, I think the change was we started getting access to real data. With the Scratch, remember the Scratch pad, and there was metrics coming through, and we're like, all right, we've got stuff to work with. I think maybe that's going full circle back to what I was saying at the start, where timing. I think timing when we're involved is quite important. Obviously, it's difficult from an EU's perspective, where you're trying to sell a multidisciplinary blended team or whatever. It's just, I do think sometimes. So I've worked on teams before where service designers tend to float, so they'll be across multiple projects, but that tends to be more in-house stuff. But you could make the case to sort of be on 2 projects and, just, pick your moments, to get involved from a UX. But then, as to contradict myself in what Andrew said, it's so hard, it's so complex, this consumer duty stuff, and it takes so long to get up to speed with that domain knowledge as well. So tricky. It's just tricky to get it right. I think it's not, it just depends on the project.
Yeah, case by case. Okay, that's awesome. I appreciate we are at time. Thank you for coming along, Kyle. It would have been a very different conversation, I think.